All right, we are live on YouTube. Welcome, everyone. We'll just turn on the recording for folks who want to do it. It is 11, past 11, so we will get started. Don't want to take a lot of everyone's time, but I welcome everyone to our exclusive Fireside Chat with Leslie Zane. Stephanie, is Leslie able to join with you or?
With with Leslie?
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm here just to listen in.
Okay, I'm sorry. There are two Stephanies. I'm sorry. Okay, thanks. Her helper is also named Stephanie, so I'm waiting for her to join. Hold on, let me see where she is. Hold on a second.
Hey there.
Oh, there she is. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Welcome. So we were just getting started. Thank you for. So let's start a little formal. Thanks here. So again, I welcome everyone to our Zoom session. I'm Sanjay Dalal, the founder and CEO of oGoing. And we have an exclusive fireside chat today with none other than Leslie Zane. I'm going to do a formal introduction about her and with her in a second. Let me just share a couple of slides first to get going. Uh, yeah, so today is October 31st. Happy Halloween, everyone. Happy Diwali. Uh, for folks from India, happy Unity Day. And for my friends and family, happy birthday to me as well. So thank you all for joining.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Still, I'm in my 40s. No, just kidding. So I'm Sanjay Dalal, the founder and CEO of oGoing, the exclusive small business community. Uh, we are growing. We just put a new release out, oGoing 2.0. We are over 150,000 members strong. Welcome everyone on this call, on this Zoom session to join us, connect with us, share your business stories. We're going to talk about storytelling in a little bit and how important that is with Leslie. And importantly, connect with our members, right? So our focus is SMBs, small businesses. Our goal is to give voice to every small business out there. We are 150,000 plus now. Of course, the big goal is to be one day in the millions. But to get there, we will use your help. This is a little bit of oGoing. Hold on, let me share the oGoing screen to just give you all a sense of how it feels once you are on oGoing. Uh, so this is the community where you go to join ogoing.com. But I just wanted to give you a quick example. And before we get into fireside chat, so here's one of the new members of oGoing. They make watches, beautiful watches with wood, believe it or not. And this is their profile. The company is called Woodish. And just wanted to give you a sense like once the member joins and they start sharing their content, not only their beautiful content is visible on oGoing and our community, but also it's visible in their category, which is e-commerce in this case. And the more they share such beautiful content, the more folks connect with this member or members in this case. You can also see where their address is, the location. If you like what you see, you can just contact the business right then and there. So it really gives your small business the ability, the power to promote your stories, your products, your services, your knowledge, all of the above, right? You can share your tips, your events, and so on. And yeah, so come and join oGoing and share your stories. And I think I just wanted to give you a quick brief on that. And what I want to do now is really jump into our main content, which is what we are here for. And let me introduce you to Leslie Zane. Leslie is the founder of Triggers. It's a brand consulting agency, marketing agency, and beyond, because Triggers is all of this and more. And she founded this well over 25 years ago. And she's also the author of a new book, and which is the main topic for the day. And she has wrote this awesome book, and I welcome all of you should read this book, by the way. It's called The Power of Instinct, and I'm not only reading it, but also I have downloaded it on Audible, and so I'm listening to it while I'm on the road or on my headphones. It is fascinating, right? Because she really talks about a new way of marketing, and that's what we're going to discuss today. She's actually the pioneer of instinctive marketing, and this new book is all about the new rules of persuasion in business and life. But today's focus is more on the business part, more on the marketing part, and what some of us who are here today, what we can think and take away with us a few tips where we can say, look, how do we put some of what she has shared into action? So, what I want to do with that, I want to introduce Leslie. Leslie, welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Same here, Leslie. You're zooming in from the East Coast, I'm assuming, from
I am. I'm in Westchester, Armonk, New York. It's about an hour from New York City, one of the bedroom communities, suburban communities of New York City. So I go into New York City a lot, but then I'm able to get away at night and see the grass and the trees.
Oh, that's fantastic. So Leslie and her company, I think one of the biggest things, I would call it the secret weapon, if you may, behind what she has done is she has worked with some of the largest brands, including McDonald's, Aquafina, Snickers, to name a few. And the incremental revenue growth for some of our clients has been in the tens of billions and counting. So we are very fortunate to have Leslie with us. She's a Yale University and Harvard Business School graduate. Yale, yeah. So Leslie, my daughter just started at Yale in her PhD program. So
Ah,
a future Yale grad in the making. I was actually talking with her earlier today. I said, Leslie went to Yale as well. She's like, all right, Dad, that's great. And
congratulations. That's
thank you.
wonderful.
Exciting time for us too.
Excited for
And,
her.
uh, and one more thing you have in common, you are a TEDx speaker. And when my daughter Suhani, she was at University of Washington in Seattle, she was the TEDx president of her university. So she organized, I still remember, an entire TEDx at school, and we were there the whole day. And I can still picture the whole day of session. It was just fascinating to be part of that. So, but what I want to start off, Leslie, is with a few questions for you. Where we can set the tone, if you may, and then really jump into some of the more specific ones I had. Uh, so here's the deal. We are on social media. oGoing is a small business social media platform as well. And, of course, now we have so many platforms out there, right? We have Instagram, TikTok, X, LinkedIn, Pinterest, you name it. And I'm sure there's something new happening as I speak. But what's happening, Leslie, is us consumers, we are really inundated with more and more marketing messages, which is let's buy now, a lot of sale going on, discounts, lots of offers on social media. But what I call this is a lot of this marketing, Leslie, is intent driven, right? It's like they're trying to persuade me, my conscious mind, that 5%. And they believe that this is going to work for them. But I know it doesn't work. Why is it really so hard for these companies to get that message across, even though they're trying 24/7? Even on LinkedIn now, I'm seeing messages a few times a day from the brand. It's just too much. What are they doing wrong, and how do we help them?
It's a great question. So most of the world is still trapped in a conscious model of marketing where we barrage people with messages, we send them promotions, coupons, incentive, discounts, and we think that if we just keep pushing, somehow they'll finally yield and come over to our brands. But it just doesn't work that way. Because the conscious mind is aware that you're trying to sell it, and the conscious mind is resistant to change. It's skeptical. It sees you coming. It says, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to sell me. And the conscious mind doesn't call the shots anyway. 95% of the decisions that we make are made unconsciously. They're made with our unconscious mind. So why are we spending 100% of our time, resources, and energy on only 5% of the decisions people make? What we want to do is redirect our efforts, our energy, our resources to the instinctive mind, which is actually what calls the shots. And you know this because when you walk into the supermarket, and you go shopping, you don't spend 3 weeks in there contemplating which brand you should buy. This one has more benefits, this has less. You don't do any of that. You just reach. You reach for your go-to brands, you stick them in the cart, and you walk out. And the reason you're doing that is you're on autopilot. That is what we call instinctive brand preference. You are operating on instinct when you go shopping for the most part. And I don't just mean in the supermarket. I'm using that as an example, whether you choose Pepsi or Coke, that is instinctive. But it's really true in everything. For your financial services advisor, for your doctor, for really all of the decisions that you make in your life, you're operating on instinct. And the sooner the world sort of understands that this is how it operates, the better you're going to be able to build your business, the faster, and the more growth you're going to have.
No, that is absolutely so true. And believe me, I have been the marketer on the wrong side of the equation, believe me, many times over, believing that if you keep hammering the message again and again, it's going to connect. But then I do hear some folks thinking, Sanjay, I've seen so many emails from you. I'm like, you know what, you're absolutely right. I shouldn't have, because it really doesn't work. It's actually counterintuitive when you keep hammering the same message again and again. But Leslie, slightly different off topic. I know I was supposed to stay on it, but this is just too important. So I had to do this. And I'm going to ask you. So, by the way, I voted this week. So thank you all. And I have made my voice count. I hope some of you already voted. If not, make sure you plan on doing that. So America is voting next week. And many believe, Leslie, this election could be the biggest of the century. Well, it always feels that way. But so on the one hand, we have a leader who is still establishing her brand and what she really stands for. On the other, we have a leader who, by all logical measures, should be trailing now by big margins. However, that's not the case. So I think the question that a lot of us have, and again, I'm not trying to ask you this on the party lines or trying to say one leader is better than the other. I'm asking more from an understanding. Is this leader able to harbor a stronger connection with the unconscious mind of his supporters? What's going on here?
There's a lot going on there.
Okay.
I think it's going to be more useful if we spend a minute understanding the brand connectome and what a brand is in the mind.
Yes,
Then let me answer that question, because I think
let's
without
do
that
that.
foundation, it's not going to make sense. But I would love to answer that question, and I
Sure.
promise we can do it without getting political. We can stick in
Absolutely. Let's
the
do that.
scientific world. So let's start by understanding what a brand is. A brand is a seed that you plant in other people's minds. And as you add associations to that seed, the seed grows into a seedling, into a plant. The associations are like its nutrients. That's like the soil, the water, the sun. That's the associations. You have to keep adding a lot of positive associations to your brand, and it feeds the brand connectome, which is, I'll talk about what that is in a second, but it feeds that plant so that it grows from a seed to a seedling to a plant. And little by little, hopefully, if you do your job right as a gardener, it's going to become a full-grown tree. That is what we're really talking about here, is making your brand thrive in other people's minds. A brand actually has physicality. It's a physical thing. So the brand connectome, and there's a picture, actually an object behind me, that is a three-dimensional representation of the brand connectome. It's a central node, that seed that I'm talking about, and those branches that come off of that seed are the pathways, the neural pathways that have formed around your brand that literally physically grow in the mind, holding all the associations about your brand in the mind. So you don't call the shots. You don't choose your brands. You think you do, but you don't, because this brand connectome lives in your unconscious mind. It's the cumulative memories that you have about a brand, some going as far back as childhood, if it's a McDonald's or a Pepsi or a Coke, because those brands have been around a very long time. And that brand connectome is what is calling the shots and deciding what you're going to go buy. Literally, you don't choose your brands, the brand connectome does, and you are powerless to resist. Every brand in your brain, every brand that you're aware of has a brand connectome. Whether you buy it or not depends on how large that brand connectome is. So if your brand has a larger physical footprint and is more distinctive and has more positive associations, it's going to be a brand you reach for and that you buy over and over again. That means you have instinctive brand preference. So the three things, through rules about healthy brand connectomes: large, positive, and distinctive. And large means it covers more terrain in your brain. It has more connections in your mind. That's the only way it becomes the go-to brand. Think about it like a game of Monopoly. Whoever owns the most physical real estate in your brain is the one you're going to reach for most often. And positive associations instead of negative ones, negative associations hold back growth. A brand that has a lot of negative associations, its brand growth is going to slow down a lot. And you're going to be surprised and you're going to say, oh my God, why did my brand growth slow down? And initially you're going to think, oh, it's because of the economy. It's because of the recession. Maybe it's because a new competitor came out. It's none of those things. It's none of those things. It's that you have negative associations that have infiltrated your tree and you don't know it. You've actually got a virus of negative associations brewing in your connectome. And if you don't learn what those are from your growth target, you're actually going to be, you're going to be surprised when business falls off. Because if you have negative associations in the people you don't have today, your non-users, they're not going to come over when you market to them. The negative associations are standing in the way. Those are barriers. So we really need to understand the implicit barriers and drivers of our business and our brands in other people's minds, not the people you have. Most people think it's all about understanding your current customer. Forget that. You need to understand that to some extent, but mainly you need to understand why you don't have the growth target. Why aren't they coming over? There's always barriers that are standing in the way. So what the brand connectome is the cumulative memories that have gotten glued to your brand over time that lives in the unconscious mind. And you want it large, positive, and distinctive. Now that you understand that, we can go and apply that to politics because, former President Trump or Vice President Kamala Harris is no different than Pepsi and Coke. They are brands.
Yes. Understood. And I think that explains now, I see your point because, yeah, all 3 points, right? Because it has to be large, it has to be distinctive, and, it has to be deep, right? In terms of how it connects.
So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
One would say that the reason that President Biden and former President Trump were the two de facto candidates for the two parties, it's really obvious. They had the largest connectomes. They had 40 years or more to build up their connectomes in people's minds. So somebody like a Pete Buttigieg or even a Nikki Haley, they're just not as well known. They don't have that myriad of connections in people's minds that were built up over time. So one of the things to understand is if you want to go into politics, you better start early, right? You can't start during the 2 years election cycle. It's going to be too late. You have to start building your connectome way earlier than that.
I think now it does add up because I met a candidate who is running out of Arizona about a few weeks ago, and he's running against an incumbent. But eh, I think he talked about the power of exactly that. For the last several years, he has been connecting one-on-one with the
Yeah,
residents of his district, literally by like going to their, homes or offices.
there you go.
And that connection is where he believes will hopefully help him against an incumbent. But now that I've read the book, I've heard from you, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because that power that he has with him now, those memories that have created that positive
Right.
association in his constituents' mind are going to be the ones. So it's kind of, you're saying it even supersedes him, that brand connectome he has built, which he probably is more aware of it now, is going to help him hopefully propel, into his leadership, I say. Interesting.
Another way to think about it is, we humans, we live in the world of reality, but reality doesn't actually matter. What matters is what is the brand connectome in other people's minds.
Yeah.
And that can be fantasy, right? That may be true, it may not be true. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. What matters is what is perception, because perception is reality. And so, if you look at somebody like former President Trump, he probably has a much larger connectome
Mm,
than Vice President Kamala Harris has, but he might have a lot more negative associations at this
I
point
see.
with some targets, for example, independent voters. Whereas, so that's maybe the downside that he has, but on the other hand, he may have more positive associations in some areas, maybe related to wealth or being able to build, your own personal business. People probably buy into that fantasy. So you can start to see, and I certainly don't know the answer to who's going to win. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
But
Um,
it is fascinating though, but
I I
it
would be
is.
I would be a fortune teller. But what I can say is that they probably have different advantages and disadvantages when it comes to their connect homes.
No, no,
Um,
absolutely. And I'm so
side,
glad you connected the dots with the brand connectome because that is the basis of the book as well.
it
And
is.
I think that question then begs this that, in the book, you also talk about growth triggers, right? In particular, you talk about, the triggers such as, taste, touch, smell, this, sound, sight, right? That can drive the best results for your brand. But I'm also thinking after reading and listening to you, Leslie, but can brands go beyond the ones that we know, like, where they can create that
Sure.
sixth sense, if you
Oh,
may,
a
right?
hundred,
That makes that
100%.
connection with the unconscious mind.
The
And how do
whole
they
the whole
do
point of the book is to allow everybody to have access to the principles that I've been teaching to Fortune 200 companies for the past 30 years. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business, if you are trying to build your personal brand, you can follow the exact same principles in the book. And really what the book is saying is this. We created marketing. Marketers created the world of marketing 50 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, when we thought that it was the conscious mind that was calling the shots. But now we know it's the unconscious mind that dictates our choices. But we didn't go back to re-engineer the rules of marketing. So we need a new playbook because literally the rules that we created 50, 60 years ago make it harder to work with the instinctive mind. Think about the law of uniqueness as in one example. We were all taught as marketers, you need to be unique and stand out. But wait a minute, the brain is hardwired to connect with the familiar. We reject the unique. We're alienated by foreign things. So what this really means is that we need to throw the rule of uniqueness out the window because familiarity is more powerful than uniqueness and distinctiveness is best of all. What is distinctiveness? Distinctiveness is putting a creative twist on something familiar.
Mm,
You can ride the existing familiar pathways, but make it distinctive to your brand. And that's just
right.
one example of one of the rules, the many rules that I talk about in the book that the old way of marketing is literally a recipe for shrinking your business. You have to have a new set of rules, and that's what the book provides, 10 new rules that displace the old traditional rules of marketing so that you can grow your business and your brand faster.
So I'm listening to you, Leslie. So, I mean, one of the things that a lot of business owners are doing now, and I think that I call it one of the positive effects, if you may, of social media, despite all the message, inundation, if you may, is the authenticity, right? So I do
Yes.
see the owners coming and sharing their stories, just like we are having a conversation here. I think they have become, I would say, a little more courageous in actually putting themselves,
Yeah.
on an iPhone or a simple video, sharing their message, talking about, what their business means to them, what they're doing for the community, some of the things where they're making more of, I call it an authentic or a direct connection with their customers. How does that play into all this? Do you believe that's actually creates that positive brand connectome, if you may?
Well, I mean, there's no question that they have a connectome with their audiences.
Yes.
The question is it positive? How large is it? And how many people are they reaching?
Mm.
Um, so what we all want to do, if the goal is to grow your business and your brand, then you want to have as large a connectome as possible and have sort of go beyond your tiny little circle that
Mm.
you might have to get to more, more audiences, like what you're doing
Yep.
with your business and with your podcast. So everybody has a brand connectome. You have a brand connectome with your family, right? Your brand exists, and people have an image of you, a connectome about you in their minds. You have one about your grandmother, or about your spouse, your
Yep.
partner. So we all have brand connectomes. The question is, how successful is that brand connectome? Is it large? Is it positive? Is it distinctive? And large and positive are the two most important things. Large is number one, because if you don't have salience, then you don't have much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one other point I also read in the book, Leslie, is about emotions, how emotions can also help you play a crucial growth, in the brand. And one of the ad that keeps coming back to me is the Allstate Mayhem ad. It's the guys, it started like initially like, what is he doing, right? But then eventually the more we saw that ad, and believe me, it does create very interesting emotions. My wife is like totally like she doesn't like the ad. She's like, this guy is really promoting mayhem, and what is he really doing? I said, yeah, but he is mayhem. Think about him as all the things that can go wrong, and he does it in a fun way, right? So I think the question is, does nostalgia, humor, or even fear, can it create a lasting impact on the minds of the customer, the consumers? But on the other side, can it also be a mistake if brands rely solely on emotion? So, what is the right answer here?
So the right answer is that somewhere in the mid 2000s, Daniel Kahneman wrote his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which identified the fact that we make decisions irrationally. We don't operate on rational drivers. Again, back to the instinctive mind is making the vast majority of our decisions. The problem is that the marketing and advertising world misinterpreted a lot of that data to mean that therefore, if consumers are irrational, this must mean that we should communicate emotionally in everything that we do, and that that's going to be the recipe for success. It turns out that things like humor, making people laugh, making people cry, those kind of go in one ear and out the other, unless it's attached to distinctive brand assets.
Ah,
So the beauty of Mayhem is that they have created a distinctive brand asset by depicting and personifying Mayhem as a human.
yep,
And that now we know that idea of Mayhem as that guy.
yep,
And then, of course, the brand rushes in to fix the problem that Mayhem has created. So that's an example of humor glued to a distinctive brand asset. And that might work very effectively. It's just when we over rely on emotion, humor, laughing, crying, etc., to be the brand positioning, that is not going to work. And we've seen just so many cases of brands that have been on a 5-year emotional positioning journey where the business has declined during that period. So what's much more powerful is distinctive brand assets and distinctive brand triggers. So now, what are those? Distinctive brand assets are these phenomenal visual cues, and visual cues sink into memory structure much more easily than other elements. It's not like something I say to you. Things I say are much likely, unless it's just do it for Nike. Like there aren't a lot of verbal articulations that have that kind of power. But take a distinctive brand asset like Mr. Clean or the Energizer Bunny. Those are phenomenal distinctive brand assets because not only are they distinctive to the brand, but they actually communicate something. Mr. Clean is this big, strong guy who cleans up your house. And so he's helping you. And the Energizer Bunny keeps on going because it's got all this energy because of the battery that charges it. So what's the beauty of distinctive brand triggers is that they are both recognizable to your brand and they are actually communicating a benefit or an expertise at the same time. And that makes it much more sticky. So a distinctive brand trigger is more sticky than a distinctive brand asset. Now, what is a trigger? A trigger is a cognitive shortcut, visual, verbal, auditory, tactile, olfactory, even a smell. But mainly in the world of marketing, we talk about visual and verbal triggers. And they are supercharged with positive associations. So many positive associations that they have almost this explosive effect on the brain and the brand. They sprout a lot of branches very, very quickly. So think of the snow-capped mountain in the bottled water category, right? So if I see a snow-capped mountain, if you see that, you know, pure, pristine, eco-friendly, natural, all these positive associations, water from the glaciers, that now has an outsized effect on your brain of elevating that brand to be superior bottled water. Because of that supercharged cue, that is what we call a growth trigger. And so what everybody wants to do in their businesses and for their brands is identify what their growth triggers are.
No, that is absolutely important. I was thinking of Fiji when you said that, the water, right? So it has such an iconic brand, right? Expensive too, but yes. Two questions related. Well, one is for a startup or a new brand, how can they go up against the heavyweights, if you may, and become, the brand of choice? Because they don't have a lot of history, right? Positive or negative for that matter. And second, related to that is, you talked about, the negative associations earlier. Can a brand actually, so let's say if they do run into that, especially for a local brand, like a restaurant or a small business, a site like Yelp, suddenly somebody said something really negative about an experience, but that doesn't mean they're really that bad. It happens once in a while. All of us go through that. How badly can a negative association impact a brand, and ultimately how do they overcome it? So I think there are two connected questions, one for a startup or a new business which doesn't really have much associations, and let's say as they're growing and now associations are being formed, but ultimately how do they really go up in a big way, right? And then second is about the negatives.
Okay, so the new brand is a seed. It doesn't have the neural pathways. It doesn't have a large connectome. It needs to focus on adding a lot of positive associations quickly in other people's minds. So one of the things that you can do is sit down and write down what are the associations you want your brand to have and be deliberate about that. Because while a legacy brand, the brands that we work on, they already have a lot of positive and negative associations, and you have what you've got, and you can change them for sure, but that already exists. To your point, the beauty of being a new brand starting out is you can define what your brand connectome looks like. You can build it very deliberately. So I would encourage people to sit down and write, what are the associations that you want to have that are going to be very positive and relevant to your audience? And how should they be similar to your competition, and how should they be different? Because you actually need to be similar in some ways. There are category drivers that you're going to want to deliver on. If you're in the financial services business, for example, you better know a lot about money. And that's going to be true for everybody. So that's a category driver, a category association. But then you're going to have to ask, well, how is my brand going to be different from the other financial advisors, let's say? So I would say sit down, really examine what are the category associations you need, what are the distinctive brand associations you're going to want to have, and define your brand connectome like that in other people's minds. Now, what happens if you start collecting some negative associations? Negative associations are not permanent because the brain is a living thing and these neural pathways are constantly changing and people are constantly learning. You can create new positive associations that your brand doesn't have today and overwhelm the negative associations with the positive ones. What you don't want to do, the last thing you want to do, is to communicate your negative associations. No, I don't have that negative association. That would be the kiss of death. Because all you would be doing is actually reinforcing that negative association.
I see.
Instead, what I want to do is overwhelm the negative with the positive, a lot of positive associations, and growth triggers are a way to do that. So figuring out what the visual and verbal growth triggers are for your business is another way to overwhelm negative associations.
It's a good point, yeah, because I used to advise some local owners, for one-star review on Yelp, I would say, let's make sure you get 10 5-star reviews, right? I mean, it's because
100%.
that actually then overwhelm the one and ultimately tell your customer that, it does happen, right? I mean, nobody's perfect, right? It just was, maybe that was a bad day, right? But having said that, to respond to a negative review is even more important. Saying, look, we have made the corrective action, and now we are focusing on, providing even a better experience to our customers. So I think very, very important for a new brand, especially in the early goings. We're going to take audience questions, folks, very soon. So just maybe hang in there. And I have one last question for Leslie before we actually jump into the audience questions. Small businesses, I mean, that's what oGoing we are all about. We are a small business community. We want to help every small business out there. We want to help them grow from, if you're a startup to get your first 100 customers. If you are already, having revenues of, let's say, 6 figures, how do we help you get to 7 figures, through both marketing, business development, operations, growth, etc. But the challenge I always see, Leslie, especially in the early goings when small businesses are still very small. And by the way, US has 35 million small businesses, out of which over 30 million businesses, Leslie, are solopreneurs. And believe it or not, on an average, solopreneurs every year their take home, I would say, sales or salary, I don't like to use the word salary, but take home money, if you may, is less than $50,000. Not a lot of people know that. So they work really hard, but they don't make a lot of money. So when I talk to a lot of them for marketing or helping them grow, they neither have big brand budgets and at the same time, they don't have a lot of patience for the marketing programs to take effect. So if I may ask you today, if there is one bulletproof strategy, if you may, that they can implement, one, maybe two, what would that be like? I know you shared about the creating those associations earlier, but I want to see if we can help them. And how would they know that it's actually working, right? Let's say if the ones they implemented in the next few months.
Ooh, okay, big question. There is no one magic bullet. There is literally no such thing.
Sure.
What you would need to really do, I think what would be helpful is speaking to either a colleague or a business that decided not to use your services and
Oh,
find out what was holding them back. Plead with them. I know you don't want to hurt my feelings, but I would really appreciate if you would be open with me about why you decided to go with this other company instead of with our services. And what are their perceptions of your company? That is going to tell you boatloads about what's holding you back. Chances are, whatever that list of things is probably present in other people's minds as well, because as humans, we're more similar than we are different. And I think that could unlock a lot because you would understand what your barriers are to growth. And now you can actually develop a strategy to take down those barriers. So I would say that that would be the most important thing that I would do as a first step. And then there are a lot of other things. You need to grow your connectome. You need to have lots of positive associations. You need to communicate your expertise. You need to create perceived superiority. So there's, a bunch of things that I would suggest after that, but that would be my first step.
no, that actually is a very important step because a lot of us don't take that time to really put ourselves, if you may, in the in the shoes of our customers. We think we know them.
Yes.
We think we understand them, but many a times there is always a gap. And who we think is our great customer, many a times they switch over to somebody else, and that really hits us hard. And I think what you're saying is if we really take that time to really go back to the drawing board and say, look, what is stalling us from growing? Listen to customers, see what are the triggers which are working or not working in this case
Right.
in our favor, and then see what else we could do to create that very strong brand connectome, if you may, with all the positives in there and build on it. Because you're right, nothing can be done overnight, but if you are conscious about it, if you take the time to connect and understand and learn and then change, then whatever you do today will have an impact on you in the next month or two or three, right? So, and I think that is the answer, right? Because many a times there is no one silver bullet, if you
Bullet.
will, right? Absolutely right. I want to take audience question. I'm sure Leslie wants to hear from you. If you don't mind raising your hand. I know Kumu has raised her hand for a while, so Kumu will go with you first. If you have your audio turned on, there you go, Kumu, go for it.
Yeah, hi. So my question is, can you talk about AI and branding, AI and your, like somebody's brand, like how does that impact? Does it look, I mean, I see in some places they use it extensively these days, but I think to some people it could be like a turn off. Turn off meaning like, it comes across as fake a little bit. So if you want to talk about that a little bit.
The role of AI and branding and where we are today. Absolutely. Big question. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think every company is going to be assisted by AI, and I think the sooner that you incorporate it in your business, the better. I'm not talking about using bots. To your point, it has to be very genuine and authentic, but there's many applications of AI. You can use it to improve the efficiency of your operation. You could be using it to develop posts, to develop social media, to write, and you can tell ChatGPT, like write this in a way that sounds genuine, in a way that sounds authentic. And it becomes almost like an assistant copywriter that you can use and just give it very clear guidance of what you want to communicate. But I think every business has the opportunity to do things more efficiently using AI. I think it's a really helpful tool.
And
No, no,
what about, and
absolutely. Go ahead, Kumu. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So what about visuals, like using imagery for your logo or within your website, things like that?
So I think imagery is critical. I don't think that so far, I don't think that AI has been great at developing brand logos. I do still think that's something that you're going to need a creative director to help with. And I also have seen a lot of use of imagery in social media that has used AI, and I do think it's quite alienating, and it does not look authentic. So I don't think visually that we're quite there yet on AI, but I don't think it's going to be long before we are. I think that what's fascinating to me about AI is the reason we have AI today is because the scientists finally realized that the brain is not a sequential computing machine. What they figured out is that the brain is actually an analogic machine that connects the dots from one thing to another. So if I say hot dog, you say mustard. If I say hamburger, you say McDonald's. That is how the brain works. We're analogic. We make associations. Well, so does the connectome. The connectome is constantly making associations and connections about you, about your brand. And those connections can either help you or they can hurt you, which is why you want to be really deliberate about what you communicate. But there's a big connection between AI and the brand connectome in that both operate on the notion of associations. A brand is nothing more than the associations it keeps.
Yeah, and I think that, when in the beginning, I used to think that, why are people using AI to take notes, in these Zoom meetings and whatnot? But the other day I was in one such webinar, and it was very impressive. The minute the webinar got over, they had these extensive notes and meetings and divided by topics and who said what, and immediately in your inbox, in your email. And I thought, wow, that's very impressive the way they did that. So I think that's a new notion too, but I think it's being used quite, like people are slowly getting on board. Even something simple like using AI to, take notes of your webinars.
Yeah, thanks, Kumu. Those are great points. Let's also take a question from Dale. Dale, go ahead, please.
Hi, Leslie. Thank you. Very interesting concepts. Really looking forward to exploring them more. I have a kind of an interesting case study, if you like, that I'm wondering if you could apply the positive and brand differentiation associations. So the CX industry has been it's very saturated. It's been very based around surveys, usually long and annoying ones. They are now trying to move out into employee experience, marketing experience, so expand that holistically across the organization. That's something we've been doing for years, and as a small business, we're very innovative, and it's been a struggle to get that message across, because as soon as I say, customer experience, they hang a hat on surveys and the mind closes. And so now they're starting to understand that it's more than that. And I'm wondering at this moment in time, if you might give me some examples of how I might leverage this time in history where CX is getting revisited, but it has very, very strong brand associations. That's a tough question.
No, it's not. It's actually not that tough. Essentially, what you're telling me is that there is a clear foil that you can use to sell against. What you haven't yet done is, instead of differentiating yourselves from the traditional way that CX is done, you have allowed yourself to just be one of the pack. And what you need to do in every single conversation and in every single communication, post, social, whatever you do, business pitch, you need to constantly contrast what traditional CX is doing and what you're doing. Make the rest of the world the bad guy, the rest of the CX world the bad guy that doesn't know how to do it right, and you, with your much greater years of experience, that you learned that this is the right way to do it. Set up that contrast, like every page. That's traditionally it's done this, we do this. They do this, we do that. They do this with it. The brain loves contrast. And that's really the strategy you need to follow, which is you have a clear foil. That's your foil. And if I tell somebody about me, about my business in isolation, I will only get this much growth. But if I explain my business relative to how the rest of the world does it, and it's clearly different, you will get more growth than if you just talk about yours in isolation.
Yeah, and my takeaway from this is I do have to make the connections, because what I've been doing is I've been saying, trying to find a hook that I can hang what we do on. Basically, we look at customers, employees, marketing, and then we use AI to optimize operations, and it all impacts the customer experience, but it's not classic CX. So I've been saying, hey, we have this, relationship growth flywheel that creates growth momentum, but people couldn't hook onto it. They couldn't understand, well, what the heck is that? And then when I go into, well, we try to improve, we are improving the customer experience, then they slot me. So what I hear you saying is that, okay, you do have to make that association, but you immediately, in making that association, contrast. And that's how you build the new model. Like for
That's right.
you, it's the model that you have behind you. For me,
Yeah.
it's the relationship growth flywheel, but that's how you build the level of association that I need with a new model of CX management. I call it revenue growth management. First connecting with what is known and then expanding that outside. Would you agree with, is that correct?
Yes, but I'm going to go one step further. You need to tell them what's wrong with the current model. You're
Right.
just adding on to it. That's not good enough. You
Okay.
actually need to tell, and I wouldn't, you're going to your flywheel too soon. You actually need to
Okay.
start by laying the foundation of what is CX today and what are its deficiencies. Start with that and list 10 things, not just one aspect. What are all the issues and challenges with CX today? Go for broke on that. Then say, now what we do is different and how it compares.
Wonderful. And would you put that in the same communication, or would you sequence that out, build momentum around what is
No.
wrong?
Saying you got to do everything at the same time, because
Okay.
otherwise, again, you're going to be in isolation.
Right.
The context is over there, your story's over here. Your
Right.
story is only going to work well against that foil. So it
Got it.
needs to have the foil to bounce off of all the time.
Wonderful. So my takeaway is 80% problem, and then always include the solution at the end. Would that be kind of?
I'm not necessarily saying a percentage. I'm just saying have the conversation about the deficiencies
Got it.
first. And
Okay.
that you may, at the end of the day, your whole pitch may be 80% on you and only 20% on the traditional way of doing CX. But what I'm saying is they must be within the same communication. Otherwise, your offering has no context. It has no foil.
Love it. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Oh, good.
We have Alan. Alan has a question. Alan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. Thanks a lot for all the thoughts. I have a quick question, but then I have my actual question. Leslie, my first question is this idea of having a foil and contrast. Is that something you cover in the latest book that you have out there right now?
I cover everything in the book.
Okay.
I don't know if that's specifically in the book or not, but there's really a world of information in there about what to do and what not to do. And there's just as much about what not to do, about what to do. And I think that's the part that people often miss. There's a lot going on in marketing today. And if you chased everything, you would be a very, very tired person and probably working 200 hours a week.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I think what my book helps you do is understand what are the things to do, what are the things not to do, and what are the things that are actually going to be a recipe for decline. That's really scary, but it's very, very true. There are a lot of things that marketers do, like segmentation is a great example. Segmentation is slicing and dicing audiences into 100 different pieces down to the personal individual. We don't believe in that. Human beings are more similar than they are different. And all you're really doing is bifurcating your message into different pieces when you really don't have the resources to do that, particularly as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think you'll learn a lot. But the contrast is how the brain works.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure I touched on it somewhere in there.
I do have my real question, but I'll send Sanjay my invoice for allowing the ad time for you. So, my real question is can you spend a minute just discussing this idea of contrast? In other words, hey, the way you've been going about that, for a period of time, and I can see how you're actually utilizing that, in the marketing space with us and obviously bigger audience, but compare and contrast the idea of this contrast versus selling people what solves their problem and what they perceive they need. In other words, if I hit them with an esoteric issue of, hey, I can solve the problem. We're in the dog behavior modification business, and so we're actually focused heavily onto how do you build a relationship, with your dog and so on and so forth. But if I hit them with concepts like that, solving problems for them, and I'm very clear about those problems, they're still of the ilk, yeah, but my dog keeps pulling on leash. How do I get them to stop doing that? And so can you compare and contrast what are perceived to be by customers obvious problems that they have with what we all know when we sell solutions, that our solution is much deeper and more comprehensive. It will address that, but you've got to get through your superficial level of problem solving to get to the root cause of the issue where the contrast really lies. Can you compare and contrast the idea of familiarity of a problem I know I have versus I don't even know I have this deeper problem that would in fact solve that too? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Give me an example of a problem. How would you go about solving the pulling on the leash situation? What would you say? What's the deeper issue there?
Yeah, the first thing, the deepest issue that we see is their dog is not even acknowledging that the owner is in existence.
Is the boss.
Yeah.
Oh,
They don't even acknowledge they're there. And what was usually the case, there comes from two things at the root cause, are usually a strong bonded relationship was never nurtured to begin with, or actually the owner is trying too hard to be successful and exposing their dog to too many decisions, too many things that they have to, worry about, that they're so worried about everything but what the owner is going to help them with, and trust the owner that they will keep them safe. So they just think, my dog's pulling on leash, I should get a prong collar and snap the collar and basically cause pain to my dog, or get a shock collar and electrocute my dog. It'll solve the problem. And yet it creates way more problems than it solves. But they're looking for kind of like this immediate solution, but don't realize that, first of all, they've never established a real bond with their dog. And second, they're letting their dog make way too many decisions on its own and not really being the trusted friend, if you will.
Yeah. So Alan, I think the first thing you want to do is validate the customer's concerns.
Yeah.
I don't think you can start by telling them they're wrong. I think you need, especially if you're trying to get business. I wouldn't say, oh no, that's not your problem, it's this other problem.
We got that. We're on that track with you. So we're right there with you.
I think you need to say, absolutely, we can solve that problem. And let me tell you what that's a sign of. It's usually connected to these things. You know what I think would really benefit you? I think it would be great if you did a case study.
Yeah.
One or two case studies where you show how you were able to help turn around a situation. Maybe the dog was biting people, maybe the dog was pulling, maybe the dog was ignoring, maybe the dog was running away all the time. But you paint this picture of, a couple of situations that you actually solved, and show them how these quote symptoms are actually tied to a greater root cause, a deeper root cause, and that you, by addressing the root cause, also then are able to address the problems. Sanjay, I have to go.
I know it's
But this
12
was
p.m. as well.
fantastic.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Leslie. You've been most gracious. We are delighted to have you on Zoom. Thank you, fellow owners, entrepreneurs, to be on this session. Very, very, very useful. We are going to have a recording. We're going to have a summary. We're going to share and also a link to her book. So make sure you get the book. And I would recommend get the Audible book because I think it's so much fun to also hear it while you're on the road, So Leslie, thank you so much.
It was great being here. Thank you so much for having me. Good luck to everybody, and link with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to keep you in my network. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.